The Station of Waiting. The small frontier station sat on the edge of nowhere, surrounded by miles of dry plains and whispering grass that bent under the late afternoon wind. For 3 days, Eliza Turner had sat on the wooden bench beneath the station's awning, her worn carpet-bag at her feet, and her eyes fixed on the dirt road where no wagon ever came. She had arrived with hope pressed into her chest like a secret prayer. A man had written her, Mr. Thomas Callahan, a rancher widowed 2 years past. His letter was simple, rough, but filled with a gentleness she had longed for all her life. "If you'll come, I'll meet you at the station. I need a good woman. My boy needs a mother." But 3 days had passed, and the platform boards beneath her boots felt colder with each sunrise. She had rationed the biscuits wrapped in cloth from her journey, sipped sparingly from the tin water flask, and clutched her shawl tighter when the night chill crept in. Passers-by glanced her way, rail hands, townsfolk, a curious child or two, but no one stopped to ask why she waited. Eliza's mind wandered back to Kansas, to the place she'd fled. A house filled with silence after her parents' passing. A seamstress's job that barely fed her. A proposal from an older man she did not love, who saw her as no more than another set of hands to scrub his floors. She had refused him, packed her bag, and staked her future on a letter written in rough ink by a stranger who promised a chance at belonging. Now she wondered if she'd been a fool. On the evening of the 3rd day, the sun hung low, painting the plains in gold. Eliza's eyes stung with tears she would not shed in public. She was reaching for her bag, ready to find a cheap room in town and decide whether to return home in shame, when she heard the crunch of boots on gravel. Small boots. She looked down. A boy no older than 6 stood before her. Dust clung to his trousers, his shirt was patched at the elbows, and his straw-colored hair stuck out under a too large hat. But his eyes, clear blue, wide with both shyness and determination, met hers without wavering. "Ma'am," he asked, his voice soft yet steady. Eliza bent a little, unsure if his parents lingered nearby. "Yes, dear." The boy shifted, clutching the strap of a small satchel slung over his shoulder. Then, with a courage that seemed too large for his little body, he asked the words that stole the breath from her chest. "Will you marry my daddy instead?" For a moment, Eliza could only stare. The station grew quiet around them, the wind hushed as if listening. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The boy blinked, then explained in his earnest way. "Daddy was supposed to come get you. He told me you were comin'. But he got hurt. Fell from his horse last week. He sent me instead. Said if I found you waitin', I should ask you to still come home with us." He said. The boy swallowed, his little chin trembling though his eyes remained brave. "He said we need you." Eliza pressed a hand to her lips. The ache in her chest shifted, no longer only of disappointment but of something deeper, something tender. She knelt before the boy. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Daniel Callahan," he replied, his voice firm now. "But Daddy calls me Danny." Eliza's eyes burned again, this time not with despair but with the sting of hope reborn. She reached out, brushing dust from his sleeve. "Well, Danny, it looks like you found me." The boy's small hand slipped into hers without hesitation. And in that simple gesture, Eliza felt the weight of her waiting lift, replaced by the beginning of something she had never dared believe she might have, a family. She rose with him, her carpet-bag heavy in one hand, his fingers warm in the other. Together, they stepped away from the lonely station and toward whatever lay ahead, toward a rancher she had yet to meet, but whose child had already begun to steal her heart. The rancher's promise. The walk from the station to the Callahan Ranch was longer than Eliza had imagined. Dust rose from the road with every step, clinging to her hem, but she hardly noticed. Danny's small hand never let go of hers, and the steady tug of his trust carried her forward. "Is it far?" she asked, shifting her bag. "Not so far," Danny replied, his tone cheerful, as if he'd made this walk 100 times. "We live past the creek, near the big cottonwood. Daddy built the cabin hisself. It's strong, even if the roof leaks when it rains." Eliza smiled faintly at the boy's proud words. She listened as he chattered, about the calf born last spring, about the neighbor who sometimes brought them pie, about how his daddy worked from sunup to sundown. Each word painted a picture of a life both rough and honest, a life that, though humble, promised more warmth than all her years in Kansas had ever given her. By the time the cabin came into sight, dusk had fallen. Smoke drifted weakly from the chimney, and the faint glow of a lamp flickered through the single window. Danny tugged her hand eagerly. "He'll be glad to see you," he whispered. Eliza's heart thudded. What if the rancher regretted his letter? What if she was not the woman he'd hoped for? Her shoes crunched against the porch boards as Danny pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and pine. A man lay stretched on a bed against the far wall, his leg wrapped in bandages and propped on pillows. His hair was dark, his jaw shadowed by several days' beard, and his shoulders broad even beneath the quilt that covered him. At the sound of the door, he looked up, and his gaze met hers. For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Then his voice, low and steady despite the weariness in it, broke the stillness. "You came." Eliza swallowed. "Yes. Though I thought, for a time, perhaps you'd forgotten." A rough smile tugged at his lips. "Never. Only this leg kept me." He gestured toward Danny. "I reckon my boy delivered the message, then." Danny puffed his chest with pride. "I did, Daddy. I found her, just like you said." Thomas Callahan's gaze softened as it returned to Eliza. "Thank you for not turning away." Eliza set down her bag and crossed to the bedside, her hands twisting in her shawl. "Mr. Callahan, I don't know what you expected when you wrote me, but I expected a good woman," he interrupted gently. "One with kindness in her eyes. One who'd care for my boy. That's all." His voice roughened, sincerity spilling through the cracks. "And I see her standin' here." Heat rose to Eliza's cheeks. She had been many things in her life, poor, unwanted, uncertain, but rarely had she been seen with such plain truth. She looked down at Danny, who leaned against her skirts as if he had already claimed her as his own. Something inside her shifted, settling into place. That evening, Eliza cooked what little she found in the cupboard, cornmeal cakes and beans, and helped Thomas sit up to eat. The three of them shared the simple meal, Danny talking between bites while his father listened with quiet amusement. Eliza caught Thomas watching her more than once, his expression unreadable, yet filled with something she dared not name. Over the next days, Eliza found herself slipping into the rhythm of their life as though it had always been hers. She rose at dawn to fetch water, swept the cabin, and tended to Danny. She learned the quirks of the ranch, the mule that balked at the harness, the hens that refused to lay unless coaxed. Thomas, though slowed by his injury, instructed her with patient gratitude, and each evening, when Danny slept, they shared quiet conversation by the fire. One night, as the wind rattled the shutters, Eliza asked softly, "Why did you write to me, Mr. Callahan? There must be women closer by." Thomas studied her, his face lit by the fire's glow. "Because I wanted someone who chose us. Not out of convenience, not out of pity, but because she believed this life, hard as it is, was worth talking on. I read your letter, Miss Turner. I knew you were that woman." Her throat tightened. She thought of the station, the long days of waiting, the moment Danny had asked the question that had changed everything. Perhaps fate had not abandoned her after all. Weeks passed, and Thomas's leg healed enough for him to move with a crutch. By then, the bond between them was no longer uncertain. Danny clung to Eliza as though she had always been his mother, and Thomas's eyes followed her with a quiet devotion that spoke louder than words. One spring morning, with the cottonwoods budding green beyond the porch, Thomas took Eliza's hands in his rough ones. "I ain't a man of fancy speeches," he said, his voice steady, "but I know this. The day my boy found you was the day our lives changed. Eliza, will you stay? Will you be my wife?" Her eyes filled with tears, yet her smile was radiant. "Yes, Thomas." From the moment Danny asked me, I think my heart had already answered. Danny, listening from the doorway, whooped with delight and ran to throw his arms around them both. And so, what had begun with 3 days of lonely waiting at a station ended in the warmth of a family. A mother, a father, and a child bound together not by chance alone, but by the courage of a little boy's question and the love it awakened.